All right, good evening to everyone. Good to have you back. Thanks. We're diving in. We're taking a step further. We've come a long way from John Paul II's original treatment of original man in the beginning, BC, before concupiscence, that harmony that he had with himself, with creation, and with God, to more of the design of human love, the spousal love between a husband and a wife, that free, total, faithful, fruitful love. And then even last week, we saw all of that culminate in the love of Christ on the cross, and what that means, what that looks like. And hopefully, we were able to take a step closer to recognizing the personal relationship, the personal dimension of that it can't be ignored. I guess it can. Can either be accepted or ignored, but to remain indifferent to it is the worst tragedy of all. So to really look at that as our starting point. Looking at the cross. And hopefully this helps us too, because we're going to go into some hot topic issues. Those issues that, like, out of all the good news that the church has to offer, this is what the media loves to ask us about. This is what we get grilled about. Why can't priests do this? Why can't couples do this? Why can't a person be whoever they want to be? And so hopefully at this point we have enough of a base, a foundation, to be able to respond. Those of you who were here at the very beginning, I said one of the most difficult parts about responding to these questions is that there's no simple 30-second answer. Like, a lot of people who object to the church's teaching have the advantage because they put it on their bumper sticker, love is love. They put an equal sign on their Facebook or Instagram accounts, and their message is across. And we look like we're the bad guys because you're against equality, you're against love. And so, as we've been unpacking John Paul II's teaching, which is the teaching of the church, hopefully we see that we're all for love. We're all for equality. But it's about asking, well, what is love? And what is true equality? And it's all about so the human person can flourish. So as we move forward into this class, I think it's really good to frame it. Frame it in this. It's understanding it's because he loved us first that we can love it all. And as we take a look at the cross and that total gift of the Lord, we realize we've all fallen short. We've all failed to truly respond totally with our own lives, our own selves, and even our own bodies. And so as we look at some of these issues, some of these disorders, as we'll find out more of what that means, we'll come to see that the disorder is in all of us in a certain way, thanks to concupiscence, thanks to sin. And so it's about embracing chastity and what that means. And hopefully it's in that sense that we can look truly to the other person, to see the person behind what a lot of times the church is conveyed as just condoning the sin, just condemning them, just looking down on them. But to truly embrace them in love and to look at everything that means. This is always a good question. Can we judge? Can we judge? Can we judge? Don't judge. Don't judge. You're Christian too. You shouldn't judge. And yet we believe that God is judge. And we believe that he's put certain individuals in positions to be able to make judgments. What does that look like? Well, as we'll come to see an important distinction, hopefully you know, but for those of you who don't, the distinction that's really hard today, but is between the person and the action. In actions we can judge. Persons, we leave that to God. We leave that to God because it's only God who can see the heart. But in terms of actions, objectively speaking, the church and her wisdom and understanding the fullness of who the human person is can speak very clearly on many different actions and say, no, that's wrong. no, that's not good for you. And so those parents of you who are out there looking to your children who might be playing with fire or playing around a stove, if your child were to say, no, don't judge me. It's like, no, I'm not judging you, but I'm looking at you playing around the burner, and I know that you doing that could be very harmful for you. And that's not because you hate your child, it's because you love them, actually, and want what's best for them. And so you'll critique them and call them to the full vision of what that stove is all about. All right, so our topics, we're going to look at women priests, why priests can't be married, homosexuality, and the transgender issue, if we have time, I guess, and then open it up for any other questions. All right. Why can't women be priests? This is asked a lot. Why can't women be priests? And there are so many different ways of looking at this, responding to this, but I think it's important to look at who the priest is. Remember last week we looked at Ephesians 5? If you want to go back there, remember we were talking about, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. This is a great mystery, says Paul, and I mean in reference to Christ in the church. So the way the church has looked at the priest, who the priest is someone who gives all of his self spousally, not necessarily sexually, but spousally, to his bride, the church. And so who is the priest? The priest is someone who stands in the person of Christ, in all that he is. And he's actually, through grace, through the sacrament of holy orders, he's had his very soul, his very being, configured to Jesus Christ, the high priest, such that the words that he says, the actions that he does, are no longer his own, but he's truly standing in the person of Christ. So how does Jesus, the high priest, love his bride, the church? In Ephesians 5, it says, the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I mean in reference to Christ and the church. I throw this out to all of you. Where is the one flesh union between Christ and the church? Where do we see that played out, lived out, experienced? Any takers?
Do you have a question on the floor?
The question's on the floor, Betty.
Okay. How about the Holy Spirit that he has put inside of all of us?
Beautiful.
But that would be his connection with us, I would think.
So great answer. In baptism, the priest, as Christ, there welcomes into this new child into the very life of the Trinity, and through the Holy Spirit brings divine life into that person. So there's a great instance of the divine and the human coming together. Yeah. How about more specifically between Christ and the church? At Mass. How so? Don't say more.
Well, you have it up on the screen, so I have a cheat sheet. At the consecration, when the priest consecrates the host, it's Christ offering his body for the church, his bride.
Yeah, so St. Augustine has this great line, and he looks at, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. He says, who more fully lives this out than Christ himself, who left his Father in heaven and was joined to his wife, the church, on the cross? And so if we truly believe that at every Mass, Calvary is made present, that sacrifice of Christ on the cross is made present, that we enter into that, then right there, we see the one flesh union. And the church is everything she can to make this real as the priest echoes those words, "This is my body." So it's very connected to who he is, giving his life for the church there at every Mass. And so if there the priest gives his self as Christ to the church, where does the bride come into play? If not at Mass, when we all, the people, come forward, really simulating almost a wedding, where the bride comes down to meet her spouse, the groom waiting for her, there at the sanctuary. And it's there that they come together and they allow themselves to be given and received in that mutual love. So why can't women be priests?
Well, I was just going to add one question. For me, it has always been the church's striving to remain faithful to Christ. And that's been a 2,000-year history of really trying to come to grips with what Christ was really trying to say. And in many cases, dealing with the difficulty of the paradoxes of what Christ had to say. So that faithfulness has always been a major thing for me personally.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's definitely about being faithful to Christ and the way he instituted the priesthood there in the upper room with his 12 disciples. And Cardinal, not Pell. Who's the one in Boston? The Capuchin. Blank on his name. He was asked, "Why can't women be priests, Your Eminence?" And he said, "Well, if it were up to me, it might be different, but I'm going to go with what Jesus said." No, he's Chicago.
And one who said if it were up to me.
So that's one answer. That's one answer, and I think true that we follow the words of Christ, and we see that he wasn't bound to the cultural context of his time. He shows time and time again he's beyond that. No one raised the dignity of the woman more than Jesus, as they were with him and his disciples, his own mother, Mary Magdalene, all these others that were there with him, who he referenced and brought in close. And yet, we see that he was a man. Jesus came and took on human flesh in all of his masculinity and gave himself spousally as a man to his bride, the church. And so it's not the answer, why can't women be priests, isn't about functionality. There are many women who can preach much better than me. There are many women who could say these words much more eloquently and prayerfully than me, I would assume. And yet, they still wouldn't be able to stand in the person of Christ and who he is as a man, and shows us that God is the giver, that he is the first giver, and that we as church, in Latin, ecclesia, is feminine, for being the receiver of the gift of God himself. All the spiritual mystics saw this reality too, and how the soul, anima in Latin, is feminine as well. That all of us, all of our humanity, have this feminine relationship to God as being first a receiver. We love because he first loved us and poured his love into our souls. And it's because of that that we're able to be in a relationship with him. And that doesn't mean that as us men in the room, we have to renounce our masculinity. No, but it means that we should cultivate everything that it means to be a receiver as well, and to be able to receive God's divine love. Hopefully, again, just to make reference to last week, that can seem really hard and patriarchal and all this, but remember Ephesians 5. The woman is called to submit under the mission of the husband, whose sole mission is to bring her to heaven, is to lay down his life for his bride. And if we truly take that to heart, then hopefully we can see a more easy acceptance of everything that the priest as a man is meant to represent. And the two shall become one flesh. Sarah said, the Eucharist is the sacrament of the bridegroom and the bride. Christ, in instituting the Eucharist, thereby wished to express the relationship between man and woman, between what is feminine and what is masculine. It's a relationship willed by God in both the mystery of creation and in the mystery of redemption. So it's all wrapped up in the Mass. If only we had eyes to see everything that was happening there, and Christ giving himself there in the mystery of what is masculine and what is feminine. And why doesn't the church allow priests to marry? I'm going to move a little bit quicker through this one, but I think it's a good thing to see. Celibacy is a good thing. Celibacy is a gift, and Jesus himself says this in Matthew 19 when he talks about celibacy for the kingdom. And then he says to his disciples, those who have the ability to receive it ought to receive it. This gift of what it means to renounce marital relations for the greater good of living for the Lord. St. Paul talks about the goodness of celibacy too. He who marries does well, but he who refrains from marriage will do better. And why did he say that? Because it's in that place that the celibate person can live fully for the Lord. A whole donation of all their life and all their time. So why can't priests get married? Why celibacy? And this has developed over time, because it wasn't always the case that priests were celibate. In the beginning, they were both married and celibate priests. But as the priest developed her understanding of who the priest is, representing Christ, they saw a more perfect conformity of the priest to Christ is to embrace his celibate love. Christ, who himself was masculine and was not married, is a way to more perfectly make him present to his people. I think it's a great disservice to say that priests are celibate so that they can be more with the people. Okay, that's partially true, I guess, that you don't have to worry about like, oh, I have my kid's soccer game and yet I have an emergency call to the hospital and I'm not sure which. That's real. But more fully, it's that they're able to totally conform themselves to Christ, who himself wasn't married, and yet still lived out the fullness of what it means to be male. Any questions about that before we move on? Priests getting married or priests being women?
Can I make a statement? So you talked about how the bride at the Mass comes up to receive Jesus. But I think you also want to clarify that the bride also, when we do the petitions, we offer up our intentions. We offer up our prayers. When the collection plate comes, we're supposed to be giving of what we toiled all week. So there's also that giving of the bride back to Christ in recognition of that relationship that's active even before we step up for the communion. Because it sounds like, oh, we just go up and receive. But no, it's an active relationship.
Yeah, great question, or
Statement.
point, or, yeah.
Sorry.
Which really goes to the mutual relationship of the spouses, and that while the man is the first giver, the woman is called to not just receive, but also to give back all of her life, and in a reception of that love, to give everything back. And it's in that dynamic that there is mutuality, and even equality, right? But equality doesn't mean sameness. Equality, equal in giving, equal in dignity, doesn't necessarily mean it's the same way. So, yeah, especially the Second Vatican Council in the 50s and into the 60s talked about all of us are called to be priests. And what does that mean? Because we're not all men. But we're all, as Janet was saying, meant to offer our lives after the image of Christ. And so when we come to Mass, yeah, we're supposed to first receive his divine love and be receptive, and yet also in response, offer all of our lives and everything that we've worked on that week, and even our struggles and shortcomings, and give it all. In my last parish, there's this sweet woman we were talking about this moment at the offertory. All the gifts are collected, envelopes, whatever. And she's like, Father, I'm giving you everything up there at the altar, so watch out. And so every time then at Mass, not every time, but at one time at least, I looked out to her and she made eye contact with me. And I was just trying to imagine like the spiritual, like she's throwing everything at me. Everything from her week, all the good, all the bad. But that's the spiritual reality. It is. The priest is the one who's there to offer the sacrifice to the Father, but standing in place of all the people that are there at that Mass. Great. So this is a really sensitive issue, homosexuality, because a lot of people struggle, and a lot of people that we probably know have this struggle, and their orientation, who they're attracted to, and the living that out, or acting that out, or everything that looks like. And so an important question is, what should the response of the church be? And if you've paid attention at all, especially last decade or even beyond, there have been some interesting responses. And one response is a harsh across-the-board condemnation of everything that has to do with homosexuality, sodomy. It's bad, it's evil, you're going to hell if you do it, and I'm not even going to consider who you are, where you're coming from, or what your struggle is. Another response, another approach that many more churches are having today is, nope, love is love, come on in, all are welcome, doesn't matter, love who you want, all are welcome, right? And so the question becomes, in these two scenarios, is there a third way? Is there another way in the middle of all of this to really respond? And so I want to show a clip from a documentary that was created by a priest out of Indianapolis to put it together to offer a third way of response, trying to find a middle ground in between condemnation or just total acceptance. And so I'm going to play that for you.
That little church had this big cross over the altar that was backlit, and it was always lit. And I would go out there at night, and I would lay on the floor under that cross, and I would just beg God to please, I can't stop being gay. I can't change how I feel. If this is wrong, if this is what you don't want, then you have to change it, because I can't. And nothing ever changed.
can remember, way before I knew what sex was, I had an attraction to the same gender.
From the time I was been through.
So the first part opens up with a lot of them interviewing different people who have these struggles and are very open and honest with where they are, their struggle and kind of how they worked through it and navigated it. So I'll leave you the link to be able to go, and I encourage you to watch the whole thing. But I wanted to jump ahead to more the teaching part of kind of where they go into that third way and everything that looks like.
The church and her ministers.
There was never peace. There was never true joy.
Sex attraction, it feels natural.
I think you have to distinguish between two elements of same-sex attraction. There's the natural.
They don't all
human
talk that
attraction
high-pitched stuff.
human beings feel towards other human beings. And this can be emotional. All of these things are perfectly normal. The only thing that the church says is disordered is when this becomes sexual desire.
The act outside of marriage, whether it's for heterosexuals or those with same-sex attraction, is a sin.
The reason the church does not condone homosexual acts is the same reason that the church doesn't condone contraceptive sex. It's like that's not what sex is for.
Because one flesh is what God originally created. A man shall leave his mother and father and cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And two male bodies can't recreate this. Two female bodies can't recreate this. Only a male and a female.
When the church says that same-sex attraction is inherently disordered, what they're saying is that desire can't be fulfilled according to the design of our bodies.
I think a lot of people, when they see in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that a same-sex attraction is considered disordered, they feel like that's very harsh language, or that it's a judgment. And actually, it's not.
And how many of us have told a lie? Well, that's a disordered attraction. And how many of us have seen a member of same-sex or opposite sex and lusted over them in our hearts and our minds and interactions? Well, that's a disorder.
And one of the Eucharistic prayers of the Catholic Mass talks about asking God to help heal our disordered desires and affections for the universal church. This goes for everybody from Pope Francis all the way down.
This is not saying, homosexuals are bad, or they're somehow worse or more in need of saving.
All of us are in the exact same boat. Every human being, regardless of what you actually desire, you're made for more than you might desire right now. Original sin, for all of us, for every human being on the planet, has disoriented our desires. We often find ourselves hungry for things that don't satisfy the ache, don't satisfy the need.
The church is not saying that desire is a sin. See, actions are sins, desires are not. Because you can't be charged with a sin for something you didn't choose, something you can't be in control of. But once we have these attractions to whatever, then I need to choose how I behave.
What do we do when we find desires in us that are not in keeping with the design for human flourishing? Well, if we want to flourish, we need to learn how to say no to a desire that would take me away from true flourishing, so I can say yes to that which leads to authentic flourishing.
So those with same-sex attraction aren't being asked to do anything different than a heterosexual. We're all called to chastity, every single one of us.
Chastity is the virtue that orients our sexual desires according to God's design so we can reach our destiny.
It's not about saying no to pleasure and no to herpes and no to hell, It's really about saying yes to one really important thing. Yes to authentic love.
The chaste person is not the asexual person. The chaste person is somebody who knows what to do with their sexuality. Everyone is called to chastity, not as a repression of desire, but as an inner transformation and redemption of desire according to God's design, so we can reach our destiny.
When the church invites people, we're not invited to a life of emptiness and loneliness. We're invited to fully actualize themselves by living out God's plan. Real fulfillment in life isn't achieved by having sex and being sexually active. Real fulfillment in life is reached through love, and love is doing what's right. And so if you're a man and you're attracted to another man, the question is, what is best for my beloved? What is best for this man I love? Because God, the church, and Jesus Christ, and the Gospels are not forbidding me to love me, they're commanding me to love him. So how do I do that? Maybe it's through sacrifice. Maybe it's through intercession. Maybe it's through prayer. Maybe it's through purity.
Living according to the natural law means humbly submitting to the design of the Creator and saying, this is the way I am going to choose to live my life. Even if internally I have to fight against impulses and desires that want to take me in a different direction. I humble myself. I say there's a bigger plan, there's a bigger reality, and I submit myself to it.
And when the church invites people with same-sex attraction to do something really difficult, to follow God in their state of life, and man, people who are doing that, they're heroes.
I think a lot of these same-sex relationships can be true, solid, good friendships. Because nobody can live without intimacy. We all need intimacy in our lives. Intimacy, unfortunately, has come to mean sex. It's synonymous with sex, and it's not. It means intimacy. We want to be known and loved at our deepest levels, and we want to know and love others at their deepest levels. So we can have lots of sex and no intimacy. We can have lots of intimacy without sex.
I don't know why they were talking so high pitched.
Munchkin Man.
Munchkin Land, I don't know. Yeah, so you'll have to watch it again at a more reasonable pitch where they're not all talking that way. Another one before I move on, and this I've heard is unformed. Everlasting, the desire of the everlasting hills. That it's really good, and its approach, and really one of love, and seeing the truth of the person and calling them to the greatness that they were created for. I just wanted to move through that a little bit and just kind of breaking that down. So what is the third way? Hopefully you were able to see it's love. It's really loving the person, and it's loving them in the truth of who they are, and as I just said, the greatness that they're created to be. I love this. I love the desire for the everlasting hills because it opens up with the personal witness. I don't know if you saw it. I went all the way to minute 26 before it ever got into the church's teaching about chastity, about person, act, about desire, act, about intimacy, sex, like those different distinctions. That's so important because for some reason it took us a while to appreciate that. Because if you've been noticing, on the front page of a lot of the agenda of pushing same-sex marriage and all these things, they have personal witnesses. They have the stories of those who truly are struggling and truly feel this injustice towards them. And so to respond only with the teaching is missing out on the opportunity for us to tell our story too. About there are those who have embraced their struggle, but have found fulfillment and true love in following the church's teaching. And that's what that third way did that I cut out for the sake of time. But all of those people were able to open up and really share how, in embracing the church's teaching, they've been able to be satisfied. Struggle? Yes. Cross? Yes. But find true love. Did you guys catch it in the high pitch of how would you describe the difference between desire and action? Is one good? Is one bad? And how do we keep that separate in our minds? Yes or no question. Is a desire bad in and of itself?
Depends on what you're desiring.
How about with the moral value? Can I be culpable for a sin based on a desire that I have? No, desires come all the time. And even something like anger. Anger isn't a sin. It's an emotion. Whether I act on that, that's one thing. How about a desire for chocolate? Sorry. Close to home for some people. Right, the desire is neutral there. Is it taken out as like, this is the only thing that I eat in the entire day? Okay, then there's something wrong. Now comes the ordered versus disordered talk. And that can be really hard, especially for a lot of people who struggle with this. They hear that the church says that your desire, your lifestyle is disorder. Like, what'd you call me? Like, no, we're not talking about you. We're talking about that desire that you have that isn't just for chocolate, something neutral. It's the desire for sexual relations with someone of the same sex. And that's disorder. Because as we've seen, created in our very bodies is an ordering to give oneself away to the opposite sex in marriage, in a lifelong commitment, open to life. So that's where the order disorder, and that's where that desire isn't a sin in and of itself, but it's whether or not it's acted upon. I mentioned this in the beginning, the importance of the person versus their actions. I'm guessing some of you have struggled to try and clarify this with whether it's family members or friends or someone close to you is asking, and that can be really hard. And that can be hard for a number of reasons. I think one of the most difficult reasons that's hard is because most people identify themselves, who I am as a person, based on what I do, for good or for bad. If I'm a really successful person, I base who I am, my worth, based on my success. If I fail or struggle or whatever, then all of a sudden my person is less than that. I look down on myself. I have poor self-worth. Even more so in terms of how we express ourselves sexually. And so you go around and you talk to high school kids and you realize how they identify themselves and their attraction is how they identify themselves and who they are. This is who I am. This is my identity. And that's why coming out can be such a huge moment, because it's really revealing who they are. So important to be able to make that distinction. We judge actions, not persons. Finally, I love that last part there about the call to chastity is truly a call for all of us, and what that means of fully living out what it means to be human, to be male or to be female. And it was the one guy at the end who said, the truly chaste person isn't someone who's asexual, someone who's renounced their sexuality, but someone who lives it out fully in everything that that means. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I have several concerns about nomenclature.
Yeah.
Not about the humanity, not about the reaction, but take the common expression, love is love. It's not. There are various kinds of love, and we don't talk about the differences and how they can be expressed and should be expressed. We sort of just, and by not talking about that, it's assumed that we agree with the expression, love is love. So what difference does it make how it's expressed if there's a purity of that emotion? And we're saying no, a neurotic tendency toward one another sex is not the kind of love that we can approve. It's not a Christian love. And is it disordered? It's a harsh word, but it's a true word. That kind of love is inappropriate because it will not lead to the sort of expression that we can approve of. And even from some pretty high off officials in the church, there's an attempt to change that nomenclature and not to use it at all. We want to use it as a club, but to say, well, it's not, it's back away from disorder and say, well, it's just another kind of expression.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the battle over rhetoric, or the battle over language and vocabulary, and because if you're doing a 10-week class on John Paul II's theology of the body, you could talk about, no, well, your love doesn't reflect the spousal meaning that God created in the beginning. And you're like, spousal meaning of the what? And so all of a sudden it's like we're speaking in two different languages, Spanish and English. And and yet the alternative is, or I don't know, an unfortunate response is to then just start using their nomenclature. And that's where talking about same-sex marriage, I thought was a horrible loss from the very beginning. A book that I would highly recommend is from Ryan Anderson, Sharif Gurgis, and Robert George, called What is Marriage? And it's a defense about the truth of marriage. And Ryan Anderson is a Catholic. Sharif Gurgis is a Catholic. They don't use any theological defenses. Purely reason, purely logic, to be able to show, no, if we look at who a man is, who a woman is, this institution of marriage that creates all of society as that beginning cell, then it's really important that we know what it is. And they, show, if you take away the need for it to be one man and one woman, then what's to stop 2 men, 2 women? What's to stop 3 people coming together? 2 men and a woman. What's to stop a father and a daughter coming together? If they really love each other, right? That's what that love is. Love is love. All of a sudden, gets washed down, and the whole thing starts to fall apart. So to really be clear on what marriage is, as needing to be between a man and a woman, and that's why there's always been that implicit two. Because if it's not one man, one woman, then why not a group of your best friends sharing in a lifelong commitment of love, right?
When we have done marriage preparation, when they're in the area of sexuality, and we ask the couples to consider the nature of a marital act, it's as if they had never heard it before, never thought about the fact that the marital act, as created by God, has both the ability to unite and the ability to create in life. And we need to think very carefully about how we behave and how we manage in our own lives to keep that together or to allow it to sever. So we end up by saying, in our estimation, what the church is asking you to do is to really consider and to protect the meaning of the marital act. And I'm afraid in the church, we kind of let that slip on.
You're being conservative with your language. Yeah, we let it slip.
I realized it was, you had to be really, one of those rigid old Catholics.
Oh, they're the worst.
See even why the church prior to Vatican II would have said there are 2 meanings to marriage: procreation, 1, unity, 2. So Vatican II, we said, well, we're going to kind of even things
practical repercussions too.
Had two heads, and what the heck were you talking about?
So if I can maybe just kind of put what you're saying together, one of the things that I've appreciated about what they say and what I think we need to take a look at is that the crisis that we have in marriage today should not be looked at as a problem of those with homosexual same-sex attraction, but rather heterosexuals who have failed to live out the truth of what marriage is. And if you're upset with the love is love or love makes a family, those slogans that you hear today, if you look back to the 60s during the sexual revolution, 70s, you'll see those are the same slogans. Love makes a family. Love is what it's all about. And you realize that it was this, as you were saying, like all of a sudden if sex doesn't have the consequence of possibly yielding life, then love is something very different. And then all of a sudden, yeah, love is love, because it's only a mutual expression of the strong feelings that two people have for one another. And if you play that out to all of their consequences, then yeah, marriage starts to fall apart. Donald Trump came on the scene and spoke pretty boldly whenever he responded to someone about marriage and said, "I'm for traditional marriage." And at first I was like, yeah, when? Like there is a presidential nominee speaking for traditional marriage. Someone came out against him though and said, "You're not for traditional marriage. You've been married 3 times now. That's not traditional marriage." Right? But I think that's what we forget. Like we think like the crisis that we're in now where the judges, 5 unelected Supreme Court judges redefine marriage, and we think, oh, those with same-sex attraction, those who are pushing this agenda, like, no. This started way back whenever heterosexuals stopped living out the truth of what marriage is. And those free, total, faithful, fruitful meanings of the love between a husband and a wife. And once those start to unravel, then the whole thing starts to come apart. We could spend a whole semester class on this, but we'll keep moving.
Wait, can you talk to how the media portrays homosexuality in an animalistic way and not something that can be controlled without self-control? You following me?
Yeah, so this is not just with love, but with the person, and then it kind of goes along with the boys will be boys kind of mentality, but it's more of just like, no, people will be people. We have these impulses, these urges, these passions that are uncontrollable, and that what's elevated as being really valuable now, or honorable, is those who will follow their passions and be true to them no matter what. The New York Times celebrated a man leaving his wife and his family because he had fallen in love with another woman, and he knew that to be true to himself, he couldn't stay in that marriage anymore. Right? Like that's how twisted, because all of a sudden, man, when I say man, I mean male and female, have been reduced to animals, being incapable of actually seeing their passions as needing to be ordered or needing to be directed in a way that could make him less than human or more than. Be who you are is a slogan that a lot of people will say today. John Paul II say, man, become who you are. He saw that our identity is not just a given, that who we are. Different though for animals. Trees are always trees. Trees aren't an animal. But with the rest of nature, trees are always true to their identity. Animals, dogs will always be doggy. Cats will always be catty. But people can sometimes be catty, right? And go below their dignity of who they are. And why? Just reacting with the immediate impulse of how they're feeling in that moment. But the greatness that the church has always seen man to be is not just following whatever urge comes, but an ability to direct and order that passion. The image has always helped me of a river. A river and what it means for a river to have banks and curves. And because it's in those banks and curves, those directedness, that the water, the flow, is able to actually pick up speed and velocity and have character. And it's that, if you will, follow the analogy to a person denying themselves, saying no here, no here. That no is for the greatness of the river to truly flourish. Because what happens if you just take away all of those barriers and boundaries? It just floods into a big, dull lake of not having no boundaries, no borders. And so to see the boundaries, the no's that the church has as a way to direct your passions so that the true force and the power and the character and the beauty of love can take on everything that it means to ebb and flow and to truly have a destination. But yeah, we've totally stopped to see the human person as being able to deny themselves. And once I have an urge, no, be true to yourself. It's like, well, no, you need to see the truth of who you are and that you're made for greatness and not just to go with whatever impulse you have or urge. Yeah. Did that help, or do you want to add anything?
I'll tell a simple story. So on the opposite end of being animalistic is the churches you hear, like priests, when they're celibate, like they have to deny themselves. It's all about like, you just have to cut off that sexuality, and it's like just totally deny that. So there was a historian called Origen. I'm telling the story. I know. He's like, don't, but I will. Origen was a historian of the Catholic Church. Do you know who Origen is? So what he did, he really did like documenting the church and getting it all situated, but he struggled with his sexuality. Like this was a real struggle with him, and he got so frustrated with this struggle that he literally took 2 bricks and just smashed his man parts so that this would go away. To this day, the church refuses to canonize him because he made his sexuality seem like it was bad by doing that. He treated it, he not manipulated it. What's the word that I want?
Probably mutilation.
Mutilation.
He mutilated it. And so because of that, the church will make him a saint despite what all he gave to the church. But the fact that the church wants him to accept his sexuality and use that to go forward, as opposed to seeing it as a curse. So I love telling that story to teens because they're like, why would anybody do that? There was an older priest who was on his deathbed, and a young priest came up to him and said, when will the urges go away? And the old dying priest said, I'm hoping 2 minutes after I die. So like that part never goes away. Like it's a real thing. And unfortunately, we don't talk about that sacrifice. We just make it seem like, oh, well, they're just asexual. And they're not. And there's so much that they give up so that we can have life, particularly at the altar. All right, sorry.
Awesome. Yeah, Origen's one of the most prolific writers in the church's history. And yeah, didn't embrace his sexuality. We're not going to have time if I'm seeing it's 7 o'clock right now. Be happy to quickly go through a response if you guys are interested, or you have a question.
I appreciate maybe this is the time where we have to stop because I'm struggling with this issue. I'm having a hard time developing strong charitable feelings for what fundamentally is insanity. So how do you deal with insanity in a kind, caring way? People have problems, but they're things that should be overcome, not easily,
there's a lot that is being pushed, and so that's good that we acknowledge that. The couple of responses that I have are, first of all, like, to truly love, to truly hear the other person out, to listen to them. I think building up that trust and that relationship, like, without that, we're never going to be heard, right? No matter what the issue is. Language is a really important thing, and so, yeah, I'm, even with something like homosexuality, I'm very careful to ever call someone gay. I won't. I'll speak about an orientation, I'll speak about an attraction, but to then label this attraction as who they are, I think is very damaging for a number of reasons. And one is kind of along with this, because now there's this total confusion of even who we are, male or female, or somewhere in the middle, or fluctuating back and forth. And so I think to be very careful with our language and how we affirm the person that we're talking to and who they are is huge. Even though the language of insanity is maybe what a therapist would diagnose it as in a charitable conversation, right? You don't necessarily want to pull that out. But to look at this issue similarly to someone who struggles with anorexia, an image of themselves as always being too fat, needing to always be thinner, even bulimia, where they need to make themselves sick to lose weight. I think this is a very good image as an analogy to a problem with transgender. What's the problem? The problem is that the person's vision of themselves in reality are off. So the person who struggles with anorexia, bulimia, they have this image of themselves that they're overweight, that they're obese, constantly, no matter what, right? If you've ever met someone who struggles with an eating disorder, you know it doesn't matter how skinny they get, they're always going to see, like, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight. And so what's the loving, charitable way to approach them? Well, don't affirm them as being, oh my gosh, what happened to you? Right? But it's to love them and to mirror back reality to them and who they are. Like, no, look at you, you're wasting away. You need to eat like you're not healthy right now. And that's loving them. That's caring for them and who they are. And I think to take that in terms of this, if a person isn't able to see that who they are is in harmony with their physical makeup, then we do them a great disservice, a harm, and actually a lack of love to not reflect back that reality to them and to bring them back. No, your perception of reality of who you are is off and wrong. And yeah.
And that's very helpful, but I don't know that people who are bulimic or suffering from anorexia see that as good. I think in most cases,
See what is a good?
Whereas in the transgender situation, many of these people are saying, this is good, this is who I am. And if that's their reality, then there's not much we can do about that. Except, well, applaud, appreciate, sympathize. But if we use that kind of language, very often they don't want to hear that. If you feel sorry for me, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. This is who I am. You have to accept that.
Just give me a bath.
It's all right, I won't.
See, but I would disagree with you in the sense of, I think so often we're constantly plugged into a media that does applaud, that does affirm, that always builds up this going against the grain or being someone different, or that if there would actually be a moment where they could be in solitude with themselves, they could see they're not happy. And that's where I love John Paul II's teaching, in that it truly speaks to the truth of the human person always resonates with truth and with beauty and with goodness. And we know whenever we're in harmony and whenever we're off. But oftentimes, we love to go to the media or to our friends who applaud us for, being deviant or being, all these other things, such that it can build up. And what happens whenever a whole culture, a whole society will, condemn anorexia or bulimia, but applaud this sexual confusion, this mind-body dysphoria, where my perception of who I am is off from reality, then we get a very confused society that's raised. And
Just two comments. But we have conversations in our own house that we have. But the problem, one of the underlying problems, was expressed by the psychiatrist when the vote was taken to take homosexuality out of corporate disorders. Those psychiatrists who were against doing that said the real problem is we will no longer seek to find the factors that underlie the development of homosexuality. The same thing has happened with the transgender. There are plenty of psychiatrists out there who read the literature that are saying we are now not looking at what the formation of sexual identity means, and therefore we're just going off the cliff here. And my final note is John Hopkins Hospital made the decision to no longer do transgender surgery because their statistics show them that this was not helpful to people, that the same kinds of mental ills and suicide that are often part of this transgender dysphoria were not solved by making the transgender biological changes.
This Dr. Paul
My
McHugh.
understanding, they have since reversed that decision and are now doing it again under the political pressure imposed. So, win some, lose some.
A good lesson to not necessarily take for granted at surface level even psychological findings or publications, because if you look into the APA, the American Psychological Association, you realize they've been motivated by a very liberal agenda and have not even been true to scientific methodologies and doing research, but just finding what they want to find and changing the DSM and taking homosexuality out as a disorder, transgender, and they're morphing it without actually being true to scientific principles. And this, it goes to show the real agenda-driven, even not just media, but doctors and psychologists. So there's good news in all this. There's great news. Even amidst a lot of the darkness. And I don't know if any of you know Father Farnon's sister-in-law, Dr. Teresa Farnon. She's awesome and really is leading the way in a lot of different things when it comes to marriage, contraception, and even speaking out against the problems of transgenderism. That's what you say. But I was talking to her last summer, and she was going into this and what the person is going through. And she said, I couldn't go there too long. I needed to get out because it's very dark. And so hopefully our hearts go out to those who struggle with this, because it is very dark. But in the midst of the darkness, there's good news, and that's the fact that the truth is the truth. And that we've been created by a God that is good and loving and true. And so no matter how dark it may get, no matter how confusing, no matter how much the society applauds all of these different forms of deviancy and confusion, the truth always wins. And so the truth of marriage, when lived out, will radiate a goodness and a beauty that will be attractive and will show the harmony of what we're made for. And similarly with what it means to be male and female. No matter how many times you flip-flop or try and be true, if it's not in accord with how we were created to be, it won't ultimately bring peace or joy. And so to have confidence in the creation that God has given us, the design so that we can fully live and love, it's a great place to be, and a confidence in a loving God who gave us our bodies not as a way to confuse us, but as a way to help us discover who we are. I always say I was confused enough growing up in high school, being a man, knowing that I'm supposed to be a man, and yet still that was hard enough to figure out what that means and the hormones and everything, that now to consider kids are growing up through before puberty, during, as a hormone injection is a possibility to alter, I can't even imagine. So pray for this next generation coming up, and pray for courageous people to speak out and to work to enact laws and regulations that are in accord with the truth and dignity of the human person. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.